Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am live again with the wonderful Dr. PZ Myers, and we're going to talk about quite a bit today, including creationism and biology. Uh, the first question I wanted to ask you was, how did you get into dealing with creationists?
uh, they, they offended me. That you hear these things about people talking about this wacky stuff that you're just thinking, hey, nobody can possibly believe that. It's like nowadays, if somebody says they believe in a flat Earth, you want to go find out what the heck is wrong with this person. And that happened to me years and years ago. Um, I got into it a little bit when I was living in Seattle, and then a little bit more when I lived in Eugene. And then I just got introduced to general kookery overall in Philadelphia. And yeah, it's, like a moth to a flame. You're attracted to what these people are saying, and you go and try and figure out what the heck they're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I totally understand. I was here in Louisiana. It's everywhere. It's funny because you see the statistics of where it's uh, allowed, where the door is open for intelligent design and creationism to be taught, and it's pretty much here, Texas, and Kentucky. It's just it's just those, so they're all concentrated in down here.
Yeah. Well,
We do a few more of ours.
there's also more of it kind of scattered around at a low level. Everywhere you go, there's going to be somebody advocating it. So here in Minnesota, there's a couple of groups that are pushing for it, and they were briefly effective, about 10, 12 years ago.
Mhm.
And the thing is that once they start getting effective and once they start getting stuff into the school districts, all the scientists get upset, go marching on them. And you know that was another place where I got involved in this whole business. Was uh, we had a person named Sherry Yecki, who was our school board administrator here. And oh, she was trying to smuggle this stuff in everywhere, and they were having hearings. And so of course you got to go to the hearings, not just to find out what the idiots are saying, but also because you got to get up there and speak out against them.
Yeah, yeah. It's scary to see the the creationists and the government. We had here in 2008 the Education Act that was passed, and Zach Copeland, great guy, uh,
Mhm.
went and I believe it's still in effect though, which is rather unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's just hard to get that kind of stuff out once it's got its claws in. But it's funny you say that they're everywhere because Savannah and I, well, also my sister, we went to a geology show recently, and there was uh, a woman at this convention where people are selling fossils and rocks and minerals, and they're telling you the age of these things. And this woman was over in the back corner with a little cardboard trifold that said dinosaurs and dragons in the Bible.
Okay. Yeah.
And so
That sounds familiar too. Yeah.
I had to say a few words to her.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
I mean,
is
there's a lot of evidence that the chronology is all wrong. You cannot fit these different groups together in the timeline. But sometimes that evidence is kind of tricky to understand. When you're trying to explain ratiometric dating to somebody who doesn't know the first thing about chemistry or physics, it's easy to get lost.
were you there? Did you see
Yeah.
it
Oh,
happen?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Were you there when they wrote the Bible?
it just demonstrates a fundamental lack of understanding of even basic scientific concepts. They often don't even know how any scientific method works. They
Yeah.
just they think if it's not direct observation, then it didn't happen, you know, or it doesn't exist or what have you, in which case you have to ask them, did Pluto exist before we saw it? And
Right.
it's,
It's also a
yeah.
kind of naive reliance on eyewitness testimony. That's the only kind of evidence they think is genuine and real, when actually eyewitness testimony is some of the worst evidence out there, because
Mhm.
we skew everything with our brains. You don't actually see anything. You build a model of what you see in your head, and that can be wrong.
Mhm. Yeah, you've heard about the gorilla, the experiment with like the
Oh
guys
yeah.
passing the basketballs.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I first read about that in Dawkins' book, The Greatest Show on Earth, and I just thought, wow, that's insane.
Yeah. But then if you actually see that video, if you don't know what it's about, you will overlook it too. So
Yeah,
it's fallibility of the brain. It's not perfect.
it's crazy to think about that. Something that should be, blatant just passes right under our noses.
Hmm.
But yeah, that was someone uh, made a point of that in a video about the Nyham debate. Is so the creationists aren't going to believe it unless we have the absolute worst kind of evidence we can collect for it.
Yeah, and also the kind of evidence that you can't possibly have. There is no video of the Cambrian, for instance. So making your
Yeah.
claim that rely on, you can't prove it's wrong unless you give me that videotape. It's
Well, I
kind of,
guess Stephen Jay Gould will be upset by that.
yeah,
We won't get to rewind the tape of evolution.
right.
But yeah, and so you've had quite a few debates with them over the years. They come to you asking or looking for a fight.
Yeah, and debating is it's such a complex skill, and I will be the first to say that I'm not a champion debater. It takes a lot of work to be a good debater. Um, but they still ask me, so all I do is I just kind of overwhelm them with the evidence, because it's all I can do. I don't have the clever rhetorical tricks, but I've got a whole bunch of stuff in my head that I can throw at them. So
I
it
think you do
sometimes,
pretty well.
well, it sometimes makes for, it can vary. Sometimes it's a very satisfying debate, because if you're just throwing the data at them, then people are learning something. And other times it just goes sailing right over everyone's heads, and nobody learns anything. But
Yeah.
yeah.
We have. Uh, let's see. Oh well, I'll get to that in a second. I also want to ask you about uh, your students.
Uh-huh.
So yes, Savannah uh, asked me, or Savannah and I were talking about this the other day, and she said, "Well, how do you think he handles his creationist students?" And I thought, "Well, that's a really good question. We should ask him."
Yeah, there's a small catapult in the room, and we just load them up and fire them up. No. um, that's the thing, is that there are certain questions that we don't address in a biology classroom. So if somebody has a set of biological or religious preconceptions, that's kind of off limits as far as I'm concerned. So I don't talk about that stuff. When I have had creationist students, and when they try to introduce that nonsense, I just tell them, there's a couple responses. One is, no, that's just not the subject of this class. We got X, Y, and Z to get through today, and so come talk to me in my office.
Mm.
The other is, sometimes they ask a stupid question that's actually appropriate to the topic at hand, and then it's a great opportunity to discuss their misconceptions. Not like, you're an idiot, that's wrong, but hey, people have been asking this question for hundreds of years, and here's the answer that biologists have come up with. And here's the evidence for that answer. And here's why we think that. So sometimes they're okay to have around. I will say that my experience with creationists in the classroom has been that they often come in with a chip on their shoulder, So they're there to show that that jerk evolutionist is wrong. But what that means is that often they're very attentive and they're listening carefully because they want to trip you up so bad. You know, if they could bring your scalp home to their pastor, that would be just such a wonderful thing. So they're listening very carefully and they're thinking critically about what you say. You know, that's a good thing. I kind of like it when they do that, and they will ask questions. Um, you know, if you're part of the scientific mainstream, you just sort of go with the flow and you listen to old man Myers up there and let's take in what he's saying and make notes about it. But the creationists have been actually asking some difficult questions now and then. I'll also say that those students have typically been, in the top 10%, because, being a creationist doesn't make you stupid. It just means you're wrong.
Right.
And so they're actually pretty disciplined in the classroom, especially since they're trying to prove me wrong. And so they've actually been doing pretty well. There have been some sad experiences. So a couple of years ago, I had a student who was firmly creationist, young earth creationist, everything. And he occasionally raised his hand to ask one of those stupid questions. And he was getting a little annoying. And I told him, if you want to talk about this stuff, come to my office. He never came to my office. But the thing is, he was probably the top student in the class on exams.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was because I tell them, you don't have to believe this stuff. You just have to understand it. So just be able to explain how biology works. And so that's what I'm testing them on. And this guy was doing great guns on this stuff, and he was actually beginning to get it better than the other students in the class. And then he dropped out.
Oh.
Yeah, because it was becoming clear to him that he was listening attentively and learning all this stuff, and it was challenging his faith. Without me getting in his face and yelling at him or anything, it was just, man, here's all this evidence. Look at all this cool stuff we're learning. And he got to the end of the term and he just realized that if he kept going, he was going to be one of those apostates. And so he quit the course, which I thought was kind of sad because he was a smart kid. Let us work on him a few more years. We would win him over.
Yeah.
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 But in general, the answer is, I don't waste time on nonsense in the classroom, and so I kind of short circuit it usually, and I tell them if you really want to talk about this, I'm happy to do it on my office hours.
Yeah. I remember you said in a talk one time, it might have been for Skepticon, that you had students who thought demons rode dinosaurs.
Yeah.
You've had students who thought that. Where does that belief come from?
Oh, it's a synthesis, right? They're putting facts together. So there are demons, they think, and there are dinosaurs. They're in the Bible, right? And they're big and they're scary. So of course a demon would ride a dinosaur. That makes perfect sense if you believe in both of those things. Smash them together. And it makes for a really cool story too, right?
Yeah. It's something, all right.
It's entertaining fiction. It's not true, but can be an entertaining story.
There are. Have I told you about the guys who come to LSU and yell from the sidewalks?
Oh, they're everywhere.
Yeah, we have a cult from Mississippi that comes over here, and I have had quite a fight with their head, their cult leader, on both Facebook and on the sidewalk, and so Savannah and I were talking about maybe in the future we don't go after him. Maybe we ask the younger people who are with him about their stuff. Yeah, what they think. Yeah.
That can backfire on you, though. You got to be careful because, yeah, no, I knew a couple of these sorts of people who were hanging out at universities, and this one couple brought their kids, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, you don't want to argue with a kid. You don't want to go after their children. So it made it kind of awkward because here you are, they're saying these outrageous things. They're challenging you to reply to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally am uncomfortable with dressing down a kid's parents in front of them.
Oh,
So that's one strategy they can follow is, use children as shields. And I kind of despise that, but you got to watch out for it.
yeah. They have kids when they come here. They have kids ranging in age from 5, 6, all the way up to like our age. Yeah, all the way to college age, and they're just kind of wandering around. And yeah, just kind of standing listening. There's one girl who usually they're Pentecostal, so it's always like the women are in dresses, and the kids always wear, or the guys always wear the like the nice button shirts and all that. And so there's usually this one girl, and she has a video camera, and she'll watch whoever interacts with the head guy, to to see how he reacts.
Uh-huh.
And so, so there's a guy in the chat named Nestlig who would like to talk to you. Would you mind talking to him?
Go ahead. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I'll send you an invite on Google Hangouts. I don't remember. Send. I've always only ever done it with Twitter, so doing it on the Google Hangouts is a little bit difficult for me. Also, the computer's kind of slow today. Of course, it's always slow. Oh well. In the meantime, I also want to ask you about paleogenomics, or the reconstructing ancestral gene sequences, because I've become very interested in that recently. And so, can you tell us what or how that works? Can you tell us how
sure
geneticists reconstruct ancestral gene sequences, or at least for certain genes?
Yeah. So one of the best examples I know of is Joe Thornton's work. Have you read any of that? So he
I've heard of him.
Yeah. He got into some good arguments with Michael Behe a while back. So you run into him. But yeah, he's been reconstructing corticosteroid receptors. And what makes it possible is if you've got the current sequence,
mm-hmm.
and ask, okay, what kind of changes can I make to this protein that don't
mm-hmm.
totally disrupt it? And of course, you localize a little bit. You say, okay, we're just going to look at the active sites so that you're not looking at 1,000 amino acids. But you go focus in on that particular active site and you ask, what kinds of variations can it tolerate? And then you can work out the sequence of hypothetical proteins. And then the fun thing you do is you then synthesize those hypothetical proteins and you ask, what do they do? So,
okay.
So for instance, Thornton's work was on these steroid receptors, and he basically showed that if you track this back, that there was an ancestral receptor that was both for salt responses, and what was the other one? The other homeostatic response that these hormones are responsible for. So what he argued was that, yeah, you could reconstruct this and figure out that there was an ancestral single receptor that is sensitive to multiple hormones, and that what's happened in evolution is that you've got duplications and that it's specialized, each one. So now each one is specific for a particular class of hormones. So that's pretty basic stuff. Neat stuff, you know, as long as you've got enough money that you can make all these proteins in your lab. That's one of the catches, is being able to synthesize these proteins, and then also having assays so you can test them appropriately.
Yeah, I made a video on embryology recently as I think it's my most recent video until this one. And so in that one, at the very end, I talk a little bit about Hox genes and the orthologous genes and or Hox genes in the in like the Drosophila and also in humans. And I don't really get into the reconstructing of it, but in the picture that I use, it shows this is what an ancestral gene sequence should theoretically look like. I mean, I could do a whole video just on paleogenomics. It's such an interesting field.
Yeah, so you must have gotten into like ACAM stuff, AKAM, Michael ACAM.
I don't know, maybe.
He's done a bunch of stuff I haven't seen much from him recently, but a while back he was doing a bunch of stuff where he was building models for how you could evolve a generic arthropod into a spider versus a crustacean versus an insect, and describing the different homeobox genes and how they have to interact to do that.
Yeah, it is really interesting stuff. It's also kind of antithetical to the whole these things never evolved. you know why? Yeah. Of course, they always come back with, oh, it was just good design, except for all this stuff that's bad design. That wasn't intentional.
Right.
So, heads I win, tails you lose.
Well, and one of the things you learn from these kinds of reconstruction studies is there were no bad genes. I mean, of course, there are genes that are defective and all that. But when you reconstruct the history, what you find is each set of genes from the past that you've reconstructed is functional. It has to be for evolution to work. And so it makes perfect sense that there's a continuum of physiological and biochemical and genetic responses to these different proteins, and they vary over time. But it's not like, the cartoon version of protein evolution that creationists have, where you change one thing and it just breaks. No, it doesn't work at all. Right. Or it magically does a million things. Or
yeah, they of course I've seen their pictures of how they think abiogenesis should have happened, and it's just a picture of like DNA, and then the next picture is it starts with DNA, which I'm pretty sure it didn't start with DNA. Yeah. And then the next picture is a bacteria, which also wrong. And so it's like the whole series of steps is just wrong.
Yeah, if you want to understand the origin of life, you don't start with DNA. You start with basic chemistry. That's what you got to do. I mean, we're doing that in my cell biology course. We've recently, we had to completely revamp a bunch of stuff, because what we discovered is that I would enthusiastically go in and start talking about, metabolism first, and redox reactions and all this cool stuff that goes on in deep sea vents, and students are totally lost. So I'm being patient now, and we're actually working our way through all those basics of redox reactions and proton gradients and all that.
Oh, good stuff.
Yeah,
fun.
So I'm doing that first, laying the foundation, and then a little later we'll pull it all together and explain, hey, you can understand how life originates if you understand this basic biochemistry.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. It's basic biochemistry. Yeah, I'm just in organic chemistry now, and it's difficult enough as it is.
Are you taking cell biology too, or some equivalent to?
I'm taking microbiology this semester.
Oh, okay.
So Yeah, it's not just the inner workings of cells. It's a lot of the
Yeah.
phylogenetics of microorganisms, which we've learned some really cool stuff I've just never come across before, like Planktomycetes,
Hmm.
which is like the eukaryotic prokaryote kind of.
Yeah.
It's such a weird thing because uh, it it has this nuclear membrane, but it's a prokaryote.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what was the other? Oh, Yersinia, which was the bubonic plague
Right.
uh, guy that it has, or there's one version of Yersinia that has. I think they all have the genes to make flagella, but this one does not. It has all the genes for it, but it doesn't make flagella at all, which I thought was just mind blowing. Because it was the day, because it was just the other day, because we had a lecture on, it was all on just cell movement, and so she said, my professor says, some people have this crazy idea that the flagella could not evolve, or flagellum could not evolve. It can't be broken down at all, and so that is just, that's just wrong. And so they actually she gave us a section in the textbook where it's just this paragraph on how the flagella could evolve.
Right.
It was very funny because I thought,
Yeah. You
she's
must
taking this
do-
very diplomatically.
Yeah. But have you read Nick Matsky's stuff on this? There on the Talk Origins archive, there's a good collection of stuff on flagella evolution, and Nick Matsky did a lot of this cool stuff. And yeah, you can see it's kind of a stepwise thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also why we start with explaining basic metabolism, biochemistry, because
Mm-hmm.
If you're explaining the metabolism of a cell and you've introduced them to the ATP synthase, and then later on when you're talking about motility, you can blow their mind by showing them the core of the flagellum is just like ATP synthase.
Oh, ATP synthase blew my mind to think that it rotates. It's here and it's just just spinning around. And the professor actually had who taught me that was bio. It was my first biology of the first semester, and so the professor I had was actually working in that field. Like what was the mechanism by which particles are getting from the outside of the mitochondria to the inside? Because he said that part was kind of not really well known. It's like, how do they get from here to here? And so, which I thought was very interesting. But that class was, it started out easy and it got a bit harder as we got more towards the gene stuff.
That's the right way to do it. So there's a red guy glowering at me with his lightsaber down there.
Sorry, I picked this icon because one, it looks like Art Noir, and I made some modification because I'm a Star Wars fan.
Aha. Okay.
And you know Art Noir, right?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. And nice to meet you, PZ. I'm a very great fan of you.
Oh, thank you. Did you have a question for me or for Jackson?
Well, I'm currently reading some articles about the origins of the eukaryotic cell. In particular, their nucleus. And I came across a very interesting hypothesis. It's called the inside-out hypothesis. Maybe you have heard about it?
No. Go ahead. Tell me about it.
Basically, you have this hypothesis postulates that there was an archaea surrounded by the precursors of the mitochondria, basically, and then the cytoplasm ebbed out of the archaea surrounding the mitochondria, and that is how the cytoplasm got formed, enclosing the mitochondria inside. So basically, the nucleus was the archaea itself. If you can understand me what I'm saying.
Oh wait, the nucleus is the archaea? What?
Yes. I will look up an image of it, so maybe it will help.
I mean, it's pretty clear that the nuclear membrane is an infolding of the cell membrane because it's double walled and everything. That's what you get if you pucker something in and fold it around. So I don't know that I would believe it if somebody told me that the nucleus was a product of. Oh, let's see. We got a diagram here.
Yes.
Oh,
This is basically the diagram that was shown in the presentation that I
Okay.
saw.
Yeah, no, that's what's different about that from standard endosymbiotic theory.
Wait a minute. There was also a more iconic picture where you have like the nucleus forming outside in. Let me see here. Where is the outside?
I see. So yeah. Well, I mean, this is pretty standard stuff. I mean, like number 6 over there. That's how we visualize. That's how we visualize the endomembrane system of a standard eukaryotic cell. So that's. Oh wait, well, so what's the outside-in model? Could you go back to that previous slide? So
I lost the main screen of the Hangout.
Okay.
No, I got it back.
Yeah.
What would you like to see? This one.
So, I'm looking at these two, and I don't see a big difference.
Basically, it says that the nucleus of the inside out model, like this one, says that the nucleus is homologous to the original cell, the eocyte, and the outside model basically says that the homologous, the whole cell, the outer membrane, is homologous to the original prokaryotic cell.
Okay.
That's the difference.
So it's the difference from taking it in and being on the outside to like being on the inside and going out and encompassing everything on the outside.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
What do we think, PZ?
I'm going to have to digest that a bit.
I think this diagram pretty much summarizes the outside in versus the inside out pretty well.
Yeah.
And the inside out model has pretty compelling evidence because there are archaea that form like a symbiotic relationship, like for example this one, the second, where you have like an archaea where bacteria are closely attached to it on the surface. These type of relationships are still around today.
Yeah. I guess I'm just thinking, that what's got me confused is they seem to be topologically similar. That we're doing exactly the same thing. It's just a slightly different focus.
Yeah.
On who's what, except for the bit about it's arguing. Well,
the difference is what is homologous to the original membrane. Like the membrane of this prokaryotic cell, according to the inside-out model, this is homologous to the nucleus. According to the other model, it is homologous to the outer membrane, the cytoplasm. Yeah, that's the only difference, basically.
So are they arguing that the original prokaryote had a double-walled membrane? Because that's what you'd have to be homologous. Yeah. I'll have to think about it. I'll look it up.
Good. Maybe we can move on to a new question.
Yeah, but no, it's interesting because I've got to talk about this stuff in my cell biology course this term. So I like throwing alternative models at them and making them think about it. So we'll have to see.
Yeah. This cell stuff is very interesting to me. I think it's all very interesting because it just seems like there's only so much you can get with vertebrates, and then the cells go all crazy. It seems, which is what I was talking about. Plankton.
Well, if you start from this, looking at the perspective of the cell, a vertebrate and an insect and a sea anemone and a sponge are all pretty much the same.
RJ found the source of the an inside-out origin for the eukaryotic cell.
Okay.
It's right over here on the side. There we go. There we go. But yeah, I'd never even heard of Planktomycetes before. Which, to think that there's a prokaryote that has these attributes of a eukaryote, that just blows the mind.
Yeah, but it's what you'd expect, right? It's all
Yeah.
continuum, so it's not too surprising.
That's true. I thought it was also very interesting when the Loki Archaeota was discovered a little while back,
Yeah.
and they had the ESCRT genes that would help with taking in or achieving phagocytosis, I think it was. And so that was very interesting. But I think also the Yersinia kind of blows the argument that flagella can't be irreducibly complex out of the water. Because why would it has all the genes for it and yet doesn't even make it?
Yeah, irreducible complexity has been debunked so long.
So many times in so many ways.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I also have a question from the audience. Have you run across Fodor's arguments?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Not really interested in Fodor.
Oh, there's a guy recently who's been throwing around Fodor's arguments, and RJ gave him a thrashing.
Yeah. It's kind of a shame when philosophers give philosophy a bad name.
So what's the basic quick rebuttal to the argument?
A quick rebuttal to the argument. What part of the argument?
Fodor's the main argument that Fodor is making.
I'm going to have to. I'm trying to recall the details of his argument. I went through it a couple of years ago and then just blew it off because it's not particularly interesting.
It seemed from Rational Mind was in the chat at the time that we were having the talk on RJ's channel, because the guy had brought it up in Steve McRae's his hangout, and then he came on RJ's later. And the way Rational Mind explained it to me, he's a biologist, he said the primary argument is that, if I remember correctly, is that natural selection is incoherent because it can't make like predictions in a vacuum. Essentially, it's dependent on other things to make predictions. But I guess that's kind of a duh, Yeah. As he said, it doesn't take a whole book to point that out.
Yeah, and he was also going in the wrong direction because he's talking about how modern biologists are wrong about the contributions of the environment. He sounds like kind of a determinist in some ways, who thinks the genome is far more important, and that there's some kind of program or pattern built into it, and no, there's no evidence for that. So as a developmental biologist, I tend to go the other way and think we don't give enough emphasis to and the contribution of the environment. So
yeah, that seems to be the trend in modern biology, because it was like totally gene centric for a long time, and that's what Dawkins' work is. A lot of Dawkins' work is about the gene centricity of it. Still like his books though. Read The Selfish Gene. Good book.
It's like he has very cleanly and elegantly described a subset of evolutionary biology. Sure, I like that. That's nothing he says is wrong. It's just that there's other things that are also important that he didn't address. They weren't part of the range of his argument.
Also, I mean, I did like his book, The Ancestor's Tale. That's one of my favorites. That's one of my favorite books of all time. I did see. I think he and you both were in a book called was it Nature or something like that? It was like the guy who wrote it. I can't remember if it was John Brockman
Oh,
It was like, I think it's like a series of essays or something. That,
yeah, Brockman's collections. Yeah, I've been in a couple of those.
yeah, I saw that. I haven't gotten it yet. I've got a mound of vertebrate biology books I need to go through.
Oh, have you seen this book?
No, I've never even heard of that book.
Oh, you might want to look at it. Brief history.
Seems neat.
Brief History of Everyone Who Ever Lived. Let me see.
Yeah, it's Adam Rutherford's latest.
So basically, no Adam and Eve.
There you go.
No, there was no Adam. But if you're interested in genetic reconstruction, if you're interested in history of species, if you're interested in population genetics, it's a great overview of that. So,
Okay.
I'm recommending it to lots of people. It's also got really good arguments against, the current crop of race realists and scientific racists and all that. Yeah.
That's crap.
Yeah. If you know anything about evolution and genetics, they're full of it.
Oh, speaking of, there's a book on that titled, is it Everyone is African, I think is the name of it.
Oh, this is...
I have it. It's like maybe the next book on my list to read.
Yeah.
Book, Evolution Slam Dunk right now, which is really good.
Yeah. No, I know that's that Canadian author. What's his name? I actually have problems with it though, because in the current climate of racism and problems like that, it's kind of offensive to say that everybody's African.
I mean, Dawkins has that T-shirt, which is, I mean, tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
He's.
I'm an African ape.
Yeah.
This is to say yes.
Yeah, because the way I would argue it is, the biological restriction of race to specific groups is bogus, but there is a great deal of truth to the fact that, and it's unavoidable, you can't argue with this, that there is a social cultural discrimination against people's history. And so I would not say that it's kind of pat to just say, oh, hey, I'm African too. Sure, yeah. So 100,000 years ago, I had an ancestor who migrated out of Africa, but that doesn't mean that I have experienced the same discrimination that somebody who was forcibly hauled over to North America 100 years ago would have been.
Hey, we're all just chordates here trying to get along.
Yeah, that's the right attitude. We're all just eukaryotes here.
Yeah. Is it a shame that evolution is often equated with racism, while it actually defeats racism?
Oh, there's a book that just came out by a guy, The Darwin Conspiracy. It's this guy he's arguing that Darwin. There are actually like 2 or 3 books that just come out about Darwin ripped off natural selection from somebody, but not just that. Darwin's also a racist because
hashtag racism.
Yeah, it's. I mean, which they've made the same argument. This is something I was talking about with Tony Hackenslash. This is that like they've made 3 different waves of this argument. The first wave was, Darwin stole it from Wallace, and then that was kind of blown apart. And then they said, oh no, it was Edward Blythe. Then that one got blown apart, and they said, oh no, it's this new guy, Mark something. RJ, do you remember his? It was Mark something. But yeah, then this guy's book is on that guy saying Darwin just ripped it off from him, which.
Yeah, it's funny how Darwin ripped all this stuff off, but at the same time, he acknowledged all these prior thinkers in his book.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, he was not pretending to have completely invented this out of whole cloth.
But what was funny...
then it's clearly an idea that its time had come, and lots of people were coming up with it. Once you have a certain body of evidence...
He didn't have a sudden eureka moment of, oh, now I get it. No, he read... of course, prior work
from his own grandfather.
Yeah. Yes,
and but they seem to misunderstand that science itself is not. It's like if someone's doing an experiment based on someone else's experiment. They're not ripping off the data.
Yeah.
They're building on past work, which is just, again, a fundamental lack of understanding of how science works.
Yeah.
But
And then there's also this guy A.N. Wilson. Have you seen his stuff?
No.
oh wait, I think that's
I mentioned on my blog just recently.
I think that's who RJ's talking about in the comments.
Yeah, he's. Oh,
how do you spell his
man.
name?
Just Wilson. His last name is Wilson. First name.
Wilson's latest dissing Darwin entry. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. But it's the
that's what
same thing where he's arguing that Darwin was just a racist, and all these were racist arguments. And then the other thing he says is that evolution is not true.
So, and then Newton was an alchemist, so gravity doesn't work. Bingo.
Yeah.
Here it is. Found it. Here we go. The Guardian. Some still attack Darwin and evolution. How can science fight back? A.N. Wilson's expose, quote, is the latest in a long line of attempts to undermine evolutionary biology. Decide how best to counter them. It's okay. It probably says it somewhere here in the article, but it's just okay. So yes, yep.
Yes,
It
and
just
also Adam Rutherford, who wrote this book.
Mhm.
wait.
also-
I missed the book. What was it?
Oh, it's the same one I showed you earlier.
Oh, okay.
Adam
yeah.
Rutherford's book. Adam is also ripped into this guy Wilson, and they're all exactly the same. They all make the same arguments that because this has racial implications, he was a racist, and then they don't understand the science at all. So Wilson actually comes out and says there are no transitional fossils. And
Oh, Jerry Coyne just reviewed that book.
Mhm.
oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah.
I imagine he trashed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I remember now. But
Well, of course, we all know that Darwin, of whether Darwin was a racist or not, is irrelevant to whether evolution is true. But you could make the argument that Darwin was one of the least racist people among his time.
Yeah.
in his time is the important
in his
caveat.
Sorry, my English is not my native.
No,
language.
you said it. I was just you did say it. I was just that it's like when people say they say Darwin was a racist. Well, yeah, compared to today,
Yeah.
yes, in his own time, he was very progressive.
Yeah.
And so
Compared to some people today, there are some people today who are more racist.
yeah, it's what do they call it? Presentism, I think, judging people in the past by.
And
actually-
who are the most racist people today? They tend to be creationists, ironically.
Yeah, although it's a
Yeah.
weird racist because
But then not necessarily, of course. There are, of course, people who accept evolution and can be racist. I'm not saying that.
but then you run into people like Ken Ham at Answers in Genesis, who's adamant. He insists that according to the Bible, we are all one people. But again, that's kind of whitewashing, to use a totally appropriate word. It's whitewashing the differences between races that do exist. And also, you got to realize that his version of the origin of races is that they all diverged 4,000 years ago.
Yeah. For
Which doesn't-
Africans from the cursed son Ham.
Yes.
Ironically, the same name as Ken Ham.
But I mean, guys, also, I mean, Adam and Eve were white. Jesus was white. All these important people were white. That's what's important here.
Yeah, and if you go through his creation museum, you'll notice.
Oh, you should see. You've seen the Mormons, haven't you? The Mormons, like when they come here to LSU, they always have a picture of a white Jesus, which given his locality, no, he's more likely to be to look African than to look white.
He would look more like Osama bin Laden than George Bush.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I'll have to use that sometime, although there's not really a whole lot of people who talk about George Bush anymore. I guess we just kind of, that's a time we'll forget. But
No, he's been replaced by somebody who's even worse.
there was one more question. I don't know if you want to just do an hour.
Yeah, let's cut it off at an hour. So sure, one
Okay.
more question.
All right. So I wanted to also ask you about something we touched on the first time we talked, which was evolvability. So can you explain evolvability,
In
please?
5 minutes or less. Well, it's the idea that organisms have properties that that enable greater evolutionary change, which sounds weird because in conventional evolutionary theory you do not talk about something having a trait that has potential for the future, right? You don't select for something that doesn't do anything until
It has no foresight. It's blind.
yeah. But the idea here is that this is an aspect of plasticity as well, that you can imagine an organism has a collection of traits, and the organisms, the individuals that have traits that adapt them to a wide range of environments, and that also allow that individual to survive for longer periods of time of changing environment, is a selective advantage. You don't want to be the kind of organism that does really great in the spring, and then when winter comes around, boom, you're dead. So, except for the ones that only live a year. But so what that means is that we have a battery of traits that are amenable to further modification because they have to be, because that's how we exist. There's also some interesting arguments about how you could imagine, this would be a species sorting argument, that you could have a lineage, you could have two lineages, and if one has greater evolvability, that is, it can survive through radical changes better than the other, then that's the lineage that will emerge later on. So, yeah. But the more interesting work is people studying exactly what is behind evolvability. What are the mechanisms?
Yeah, I have heard about it before. I think Aron Ra talked about it in terms of specialized versus generalized. Like, for example, you have a very specialized animal like a specific anteater that only eats one type of ant, for example. And better example, the koala bear, that he only eats eucalyptus. And if the eucalyptus is extinct, then the koala most likely will also be extinct, or it would have to be readapt to another diet, which is difficult for the koala to do. But if you have like a very generalized marsupial that is already well adapted to multiple different circumstances, it has a more likely chance to survive change.
Yeah.
Well, except for in the Noah's Ark story, I guess the koalas stopped eating eucalyptus for a while because they had to walk all the way over to the Middle East and then get on the boat. Somehow Noah knew about the one specific type of tree on this island that hadn't been discovered yet.
Well, what did the termites eat on the Noah's Ark? Oops.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Like how many like hundreds of species are there of termites?
But another example of evolvability, I don't know if I'd use the general versus specific argument, because one great example of evolvability is when you look at the African cichlids, right?
Whoa!
So
cichlids.
Yeah.
Is it fish? Is it that type of fish?
Yes.
Ah, yes.
And they've gone through some amazing adaptive radiations, where they evolve all kinds of different jaw structures.
Oh yeah.
Specialized feeding.
Yeah, I saw a paper about that recently. The phenotypic plasticity of cichlids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And why don't other fish do that? Because for some reason that feature in a cichlid is more evolvable than the jaw of a salmon, for instance. So you get these radical changes that occur at a fairly rapid clip. in cichlid species, but not in other species. And there's got to be something to explain that difference.
Yeah, they go through very extremely quick, relatively speaking, speciation, because they all, like the Tanganyika, Malawi, and Victoria, the cichlids, they all share a common ancestor. It was only like 12,000 years ago, and so
Yep.
they've just very quickly speciated. They're talking about that's a lot of epigenetic stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
Partly.
I have read this before on the Berkeley University website, and it mentions this cichlids. These different types of jaws adapted to specific diets. It's very interesting.
RJ pointed out in the comments that the Cambrian arthropod, or a lot of the different Cambrian groups that came around and died off, could show lack of evolvability.
Yeah. So
Is there a whole bunch?
So there's got to be something going on, in the development and the organization of these organisms that contributes to some being more flexible than others.
Yeah.
Another example that comes to mind, because I was just seeing my cat wandering around. Look at cats. Cats go through. There's a wide range of sizes of cats, right? There's lions and tigers, and there's house cats and all this stuff.
Oh my.
Oh my.
But their basic form is pretty much the same. A lion looks like a scaled up house cat, with differences, of course, but
Yeah.
Except for those ugly hyenas.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But then you look at dogs.
Yeah.
And dogs exhibit a much greater range of morphological variation.
Yeah.
And why is that? There's got to be something different about the organization of morphology of these two animals, where cats are more constrained than dogs.
Yeah.
Evo Devo, you have got a job to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do. There's lots
You
of work to do.
You actually look at the feliforms, and you're right. It's not a whole lot of variation. Even outside of the cats, you've just got the civets and genets, and they all look about the same.
Yeah.
But then you look at the caniforms. You've got bears, dogs, seals, mustelids. It's just this
Yeah.
Yeah.
huge range of forms.
Yeah.
And so
And for
and why?
seals specifically, yeah, they look so much different than the closest living relatives, like which are bears, I think. Which are the closest living relatives of seals?
something like that. They're all caniforms.
I think bears are the closest living relatives. I don't know specifically.
Let's see. I can probably look it up. But any concluding remarks, PZ, in this league?
I want to point out that I think that the arthropod body plan is very flexible, because you have like a simple starting body plan, like a head, and then repeating segments with two legs on one leg on each side, and that can adapt to in various different means, and it has with the specific groups of arthropods.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so segmentation is an aspect of evolvability.
Yeah.
Why are so many of them segmented? Why are we segmented? Yeah, why it just comes up over and over again.
And you have like a segment adapting into like a class or poisonous fangs in like spiders, for example. They look like fangs, but they aren't really fangs. They are more like pincers, really.
For the ophiones, the daddy long legs, as a lot of people call them. There's like they're chelicera, they are actually the little pinchers. They're not the fangs, which is why there's that stupid rumor or urban legend, whatever, that they're the world's deadliest spider. It's like, but they're just too small to bite you or to break the skin. But it's funny because they're not spiders. They don't have venom glands. These aren't even fangs. They're claws.
Yeah, they are claws. Yes.
Yeah.
It's like they're wrong on all possible counts with this thing. But anyway, so it's been about an hour.
Okay.
So we're ready to
So closing thoughts. We should do it again sometime.
Yeah.
All right. Great. That's what I like to hear. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming,
It's been a pleasure.
and
Yeah.
thank you for being here, guys.
Okay.
So-
Talk to you later.
All right, bye.
Bye.